Night folds itself over the borderlands of the Sahel like a curtain of charcoal silk. The last line of dusk sinks behind scrub trees and thorny acacias, leaving the earth in a hush so deep it feels older than memory. Footsteps glide across the sand, not hurried, not hesitant, just purposeful, as if the darkness itself were guiding them. Somewhere far off, a motorbike coughs once, then disappears into silence. Here, war begins not with sirens or banners, but with the subtle shifting of shadows. Power moves in whispers, territory changes hands without a word uttered. A single signal, the flick of a torch, the shuffle of boots, a door closing at the wrong hour, can tilt the balance of entire regions. This is a world where maps blur, where borders breathe, where the night becomes the only witness to conflict. And so we step closer, into a landscape where battles leave no footprints by morning, where fear and resolve travel the same hidden paths. Join us as we enter the realm where war has no straight line and the truth lives between flickers of moonlight. The Sahel stretches across the continent like a pale, trembling scar, a band of land caught between desert and savanna, drought and survival, silence and gunfire. From Mauritania to Chad, it is a frontier of porous borders and endless horizons, where the night hides more than it reveals. In the border triangle of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, the ground is baked red, the air carries dust, and the lines on maps mean less than the tracks left by tires and hooves. In daylight, the landscape appears still, almost peaceful. A riverbed dries into cracked mosaic. Goats move in loose clusters. Villagers return from wells with plastic barrels and faded cloth wrapped around their heads. But as the sun descends, the scenery changes. The Sahel does not simply darken, it transforms. Haze thickens, the wind drops, and the horizon disappears into a deep violet silence that stretches for hundreds of kilometers. This silence is not a pause, it is a preparation. For more than a decade, conflict here has been defined by asymmetry. Not armies clashing in open fields, but small mobile groups navigating the shadows. From roughly 2010 to 2024, nighttime raids multiplied across the central Sahel. Fighters on motorbikes traveling in units of 10, 20, sometimes 50, targeted isolated posts, convoys, mayors, schools, and village meeting halls. They struck with speed, precision, and the patience of hunters who know every dune, every footpath, every unlit corner of the frontier. Borders in this region are not walls, they are ideas. A dry riverbed may mark one, a cluster of thorn trees may define another. Caravans and herders have crossed these lines for centuries, long before states drew them. Insurgent groups exploit this fluidity. One moment they are in Mali. Minutes later they slip into Burkina Faso. Before dawn they vanish into Niger. The night allows them to be everywhere and nowhere, a presence without form, a threat without direction. In the daytime, governments speak of control. They build outposts, deploy patrols, erect checkpoints along key roads. But at night the balance shifts. An outpost that looks sturdy under the sun becomes a fragile island in darkness. A village that seems calm at midday becomes an echoing void after dusk. Residents locking their doors, gathering children close, waiting for sounds that might signal danger. The low growl of engines, the click of a rifle, the soft rhythm of boots crossing dirt. These raids are not long battles. They are bursts of violence lasting minutes, sometimes less. A perimeter breached, a guard tower disabled, a commander targeted. Motorbikes surge in, headlights turned off, shots crack through the dark, ricocheting off corrugated roofs and mud brick walls. A fire ignites, climbing quickly. Then the intruders vanish before the defenders can understand what has happened. Over the years, the pattern has become brutally familiar. In 2012, 2015, 2017, each period marked by the rise of increasingly agile armed networks. By 2020, the rhythm of the conflict had changed entirely. The night was no longer a tactical option, it was the main theater. And by 2024, large swaths of the borderlands had become zones of uncertainty. where neither state nor civilian could predict who controlled which stretch of land once the sun went down. Yet amid this instability, life continues. Farmers still plant millet. Traders still drive battered pickups across checkpoints. Children still chase each other through dusty courtyards. But beneath each routine lies an unspoken truth. The most important decisions in the Sahel are no longer made in daylight. They are made in the hours when only the moon sees the movement of men and the shifting of power. And this is what defines the Sahel's hidden conflict. War without front lines, fought by units that appear and disappear like mirages. A war where the day belongs to governments and the night belongs to those who refuse to fight on equal ground. A war that shapes boundaries more effectively than any treaty or mapmaker ever could. Tonight, as the last glow of orange slips behind the dunes, a small group prepares to move, their silhouettes tightening packs, adjusting rifles, nodding silently to one another. The wind stills, the darkness deepens, and the Borderlands hold their breath, because somewhere out there, just beyond the reach of torchlight, a new raid is about to begin. The outpost sits alone at the edge of a dry plain, a cluster of mud brick walls and rusted metal sheets held together by habit more than engineering. By day it feels abandoned, by night it feels exposed. The soldiers stationed here know the routine intimately. The same patrol route traced every evening, the same anxious glances at the road that disappears into darkness, the same quiet hope that tonight will pass like the last, uneventful, forgettable, safe. But the Sahel rarely grants such nights anymore. Just after 2 a.m., when the desert air grows cold and the last ember in the cooking pot fades, something shifts. A faint vibration rides the ground, not loud, not even distinct, more like a pulse, a tremor of engines far away. One soldier raises his head listening, another checks the radio. A third, younger and trembling slightly, steps onto the rampart and peers into the vast black ahead. The moon has hidden itself behind a veil of high clouds. The landscape is nothing but silhouettes and suggestion, perfect cover, perfect timing. Out beyond the thorn trees, where the terrain dips before rising again in a gentle ridge, the first motorbikes glide into view, engines cut, wheels rolling silently. 10, then 15, then perhaps 20 riders. No headlights, only the faint shine of metal catching stray moonlight. Behind them, a pickup truck creeps forward, its bed loaded with fuel cans, ammunition, and 2 fighters perched with belts of ammunition crossed over their chests. This is a typical assault formation in the Borderlands. Motorbikes in front, swift, flexible, ideal for probing defenses. The pickup behind, carrying heavier firepower, sometimes even a makeshift mortar. Scouts have already mapped every blind angle of the outpost, marking the exact point where the walls dip or the floodlight fails to reach. There is no battle cry, no warning shot, only the sudden crack of a rifle and the explosion of light as the first round slams into the communications mast. The entire outpost jolts awake, dust rises, radios sputter. A soldier shouts an order he barely understands, and then the night erupts. Motorbikes surge forward like a flock of dogbirds breaking formation. Fighters dismount, sprint low, rifles tight against their shoulders. Shots flash in staccato rhythm, short, controlled bursts designed to shock, confuse, overwhelm. The defenders fire back blindly, trying to locate shapes moving too fast to track. The entire engagement collapses into a chaos of muzzle flashes and frantic breathing. 3 minutes pass, maybe 4. In a fight like this, time loses meaning. The attackers split into 2 teams. One suppresses the defenders from the front, while the other circles behind the outpost, cutting escape routes, planting a firebomb against the rear wall. For a few seconds, the only sound is the hiss of a burning fuse. Then a blast rips through the back sector, sending debris into the night sky. Men stumble, sand blinds, confusion becomes paralysis. Somewhere inside the outpost, a soldier screams for reinforcements into a dying radio. Static answers. To the attackers, this is enough. Their mission is never to occupy, never to hold ground, only to strike, destabilize, and disappear. A philosophy of war shaped by necessity. When you cannot win the day, you dominate the night. A veteran of these battles once described the experience in a hushed, haunted tone. You don't fight the men, you fight the darkness. By the time you see them, the fight is already ending. Within minutes the raiders withdraw, motorbike engines roar back to life, figures leap on the saddles, bodies silhouetted briefly in the flames licking the outpost walls. A few parting shots crack through the air, not aimed, but symbolic, a reminder, a signature, and then the night swallows them. By the time the defenders regroup, checking for wounded, counting ammunition, trying to restore radio contact, the attackers are already kilometers away, riding without headlights, navigating by memory. The desert seems to protect them, offering paths that no map records. A helicopter dispatched at dawn scans the area, but finds only circular tire patterns in the dust, already half erased by wind. The adrenaline fades, replaced by a gnawing truth. The battle may have lasted only minutes, but its consequences will linger for months. Morale sinks. Locals whisper. Rumors spread across nearby villages. The question circulates in every market and checkpoint. If the state cannot guard its nights, what can it guard? This is the hidden choreography of nocturnal war, fast, brutal, untraceable. Its power lies not in victory, but in the message it sends. We can reach you, anytime, anywhere. Yet the most striking part is not the raid itself, not the muzzle flash or the flames, not the roar of engines fading into the horizon. It's the silence that follows. Because for the men who defend these outposts, for the families living in nearby villages, for the authorities struggling to keep a fragile grip on the region, the real battle doesn't start with the first shot. It begins after the last echo fades into the desert. Dawn arrives gently in the Sahel, not with color but with the slow lifting of darkness, like a curtain pulled upward by unseen hands. The raid is over, yet its echo lingers in the soil, in the breath of the people who rise cautiously from their huts, in the way doors open only halfway, as if to negotiate with the morning. The sky is pale, washed out, and the air carries the metallic scent of spent cartridges mixed with wood smoke. A woman steps outside first. She moves carefully, scanning the road for tire marks before sending her child to fetch water. A shepherd hesitates before untying his goats, listening for any sign that the raiders might still be nearby. Even birds seem to take flight more quietly. It is not what was destroyed that unsettles them, but what might return. For communities scattered across the borderlands, night attacks redraw daily life. Some villages shift entirely, moving their huts closer to rivers or rocky outcrops, where sound travels better, or closer to government posts even if those posts offer little real protection. Others abandon their homes altogether, joining the long, slow migration of internally displaced families, walking along dusty tracks with mattresses rolled over their heads. They leave behind fields, wells, graves of ancestors, forced not by territorial conquest, but by the steady erosion of confidence in the safety of darkness. Fear becomes a kind of governance. At sunset, families gather their children indoors. Fires burn low. Songs that once filled courtyards fall silent. A new rhythm governs the night, one dictated not by tradition, but by uncertainty. Local leaders wrestle with impossible choices. Do they negotiate informally with armed groups to ensure a fragile peace, knowing this erodes the authority of the state? Do they double their trust in national forces, hoping reinforcements will arrive next time? Or do they form their own self-defense units, risking retaliation? Every option carries weight. Every decision can shift the future of a village. In many areas, state presence dissolves one outpost at a time. A school closes because teachers refuse to travel the road. A clinic shutters after receiving threats. A market relocates when traders fear ambush along the riverbank. What begins as a single night raid gradually unravels the social fabric. Threads pulled quietly until the entire tapestry loosens. This is the political power of the night. When the sun sets, authority itself transforms. The government controls the day, offices, checkpoints, speeches, patrols, but the insurgent controls the darkness, movement, intimidation, fear. The contest is no longer over land, but over time. Who owns the hours when people sleep? Who determines what is heard, what is whispered, what is remembered? The term locals sometimes use, spoken softly, almost uneasily, is shadow sovereignty. One presence commands on paper, another governs in the dark. The night becomes a political territory, a space where competing powers negotiate with silence as their currency. A village chief may pledge loyalty to the state at noon, then receive an unannounced visit after dusk, altering his path by necessity rather than ideology. This quiet oscillation, repeated across hundreds of communities, slowly reshapes the balance of power without a single formal declaration. And the consequences ripple outward. In the towns, rumors spread. Night travelers saw armed men near the old well. A checkpoint was abandoned at midnight. A convoy never reached the capital. These murmurs drift into conversations in markets and mosques, feeding a collective anxiety that wears down trust in the institutions. When nightfall becomes a threat rather than a relief from heat, governance itself grows brittle. Politicians in distant capitals hold meetings, issue statements, draft new security strategies. But the heart of the crisis beats far from their chambers, in villages where mothers keep lamps burning all night to calm their children, in border hamlets where men take turns staying awake, in farming communities where harvests shrink because no one wants to work late into the evening. The erosion of normal life becomes its own kind of victory for those who thrive in instability. Without firing a single shot, they achieve control. Without occupying territory, they instill obedience. Without appointing officials, they influence decisions. Yet amid this slow unraveling, a countercurrent appears. In some villages, community watch groups organize discreetly, armed with torches and whistles instead of rifles. Elders teach children to recognize engine sounds and patterns in the night wind. Traders form convoys, refusing to travel alone. Clerics hold gatherings after dawn, offering calm where fear has taken root. These small acts do not restore order, but they preserve dignity, a resistance shaped not by weapons, but by endurance. Across the borderlands, whispers begin to circulate of new tools arriving, devices that pierce the darkness, patrols equipped with night vision gear, early warning networks linking villages with military posts. Not enough to shift the balance yet, but enough to remind communities that the night is not an inevitability. Still, the central question hangs in the air, unspoken yet felt at every sunset. Who truly governs the hours when lamps go out? The state, which claims authority by law, or the shadows, which move freely without permission? As families prepare once more for nightfall, bolting doors and lowering voices, a new factor begins to stir at the edge of this conflict, a presence that neither side fully understands. Somewhere beyond the dunes, something new is learning how to see through the dark. From Addis Ababa to Abuja, from Brussels to Washington, the night raids of the Sahel appear on screens as satellite dots, heat signatures, coded briefings. But maps and dashboards cannot capture the lived reality of a conflict shaped by silence. International actors read the region like a shifting puzzle. Borders flickering, alliances redrawn, juntas rising, foreign partners expelled, new ones invited. Yet none can fully grace the war that unfolds between dusk and dawn. For the African Union, the Sahel stands as both a warning and a test. Reports circulate through AU corridors describing the crisis not as a conventional insurgency, but as a mosaic of local grievances, collapsing governance, and fast-mutating armed networks. Committees debate joint brigades, intelligence sharing, regional stabilization forces. But every proposal collides with political friction, sovereignty, distrust, and the hard truth that night warfare requires tools many states cannot yet field. ECOWAS watches with anxiety of its own. The coups of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger fractured its security architecture, complicating intervention mandates. What once operated as a unified regional bloc now resembles a constellation of diverging paths. Member states calibrating their loyalties between regional norms, national pride, and shifting external partnerships. Sanctions, negotiations, warnings, none have been enough to stem the growing influence of non-state actors who thrive in political vacuum. Beyond the continent, Europe observes the crisis with a mix of strategic concern and uneasy déjà vu. Migration routes, energy corridors, counter-terrorism networks all touch the Sahel. European advisors once dotted bases from Gao to Tillabéri. Now many have withdrawn or been replaced, yet the shadows expanding across the borderlands track directly toward European interests, reminding policymakers that distance does not equal safety. The question lingers in diplomatic circles. How do you support a region where the ground shifts faster than strategies can adapt? Across the Atlantic, the United States adopts a cautious posture. Intelligence analysts refer to the region increasingly as a theater of hybrid conflict, where drones, motorcycles, ideological factions, criminal economies, and geopolitics interweave into a single complex tapestry. But Washington faces limits. With troops scaled back, influence contested, and alliances fluid, the US relies heavily on remote surveillance, training programs, and partnerships that increasingly compete with the presence of new players. Because the Sahel has become a crossroads of external ambitions. Turkish Bayraktar drones circle above new runways. Russian aircraft land under night cover. Gulf states extend financial networks. European missions recalibrate. Wangling influence in a region where legitimacy depends less on ideology and more on who can deliver security before sunrise. Yet despite all this attention, all the reports and meetings and communiques, the core dilemma remains unchanged. Foreign actors see the conflict through the lens of daylight logic, doctrines, frameworks, institutions. But the war itself thrives at night, in a domain where satellites blur, patrols thin, and governments lose their reach. And while diplomats argue over strategies in capital cities, in the Sahel, a quieter revolution is emerging. New sensors tested on border ridges, drone pilots trained in repurposed airstrips, early warning systems linking villages to distant command rooms. Technology creeping into a space once ruled only by instinct and memory. It is not yet decisive, not yet transformative, but its presence is unmistakable, a new kind of vision entering the night. And in these borderlands, where shadows have long been the strongest force, the arrival of this watchful eye signals a shift that neither insurgents nor states can ignore. Because if the night has shaped this war for more than a decade, what happens when the night is no longer dark? Dawn in the Sahel is never just a sunrise. It is a verdict. Each morning reveals what survived the night, what was lost, what can still be rebuilt. And in this fragile light, the path forward begins to take shape, drawn not by certainty, but by possibility. 3 futures stand before the borderlands, each shaped by the choices of communities, states, and unseen actors watching from above. The first path is escalation. In this scenario, night raids intensify, armed groups splinter and multiply, and borders fade even further into abstraction. Villages empty. Roads fall silent after sunset. States stretch thin, fortify only key towns, while vast rural zones become arenas where shadows rule uncontested. Technology helps little. Too few drones, too few trained operators, too much terrain. The night deepens, not just as a physical space but as a political one. People adapt to living within its boundaries, moving like water around danger, surviving but seldom living. The second path is stalemate, a prolonged, grinding equilibrium of unease. Governments hold the days, insurgents hold the nights. Local militias rise, determined to defend their communities, yet vulnerable to infiltration and retaliation. Markets continue, schools reopen sporadically, fields are tilled, but every routine is hemmed in by caution. Here the conflict becomes a slow burn rather than a wildfire. A place where hope is not extinguished, but rationed, where every improvement feels reversible, where progress depends on fragile understandings. armed groups avoiding certain villages, soldiers coordinating more closely with civilians, communities building quiet networks of warning and protection. The third path, though the hardest, is one many still dare to imagine: the reclamation of the night. This future depends not on sweeping offensives, but on rebuilding the human chain that has held the Sahel together for centuries: trust, cooperation, shared vigilance. It begins with local tracts of stability, a village watch team trained to recognize movement, a patrol equipped with a single working thermal scope, a radio tower repaired between 3 communities, a convoy escorted safely through a road once ruled by bandits. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Here, the true strength comes from those who know the land, trackers who can read footprints in moonlight, elders who know which paths whisper danger, youth groups mapping safe corridors, women's associations organizing night shelter points for displaced families. These actors form the quiet backbone of resilience. And as technology trickles in, drones gliding over riverbeds, sensors placed on strategic ridges, early warning messages spreading through dusty phone screens, the balance shifts by a degree, not by spectacle. The night becomes chartable, predictable, maybe even governable. In this future, the Sahel does not become fully safe, but it becomes navigable again. Communities breathe a little easier. Children fall asleep without listening for engines. Traders drive at dusk. Soldiers patrol with confidence rather than dread. It is not a return to what was, but the birth of what could be. A landscape where endurance becomes unity and unity becomes strength. As the sun climbs over the borderlands, warming the dunes and lighting the paths between villages, one truth rises with it: tomorrow may bring danger, yes, but it may also bring change. Because when the night comes again, the battlefield will not be the same. The Sahel's borderlands stretch beneath a swelling sky, stitched together by stories that rarely reach the world beyond the dunes. Yet it is here, in the silence after a raid, in the trembling lamplight of a village courtyard, in the weary stillness of an outpost rebuilt for the 5th time, that the meaning of these secret battles becomes clear. They are small in scale, but immense in consequence. Not grand sieges or sweeping offensives, but fleeting strikes that shift loyalties, redraw influence, and erode or restore confidence one night at a time. A raid lasting minutes can empty a village. A single outpost lost can tilt regional politics. A convoy ambushed in the dark can rewrite alliances in distant capitals. These moments, scattered and unseen, accumulate into a quiet force that shapes the Sahel more deeply than any declaration or summit. They remind us that conflict is not always a spectacle. Sometimes it is the soft closing of a door at midnight, the extinguished lamp, the track erased by a wind. In this landscape, shadow sovereignty has become more than a phrase. It is a lived reality. It defines who dares to travel after dusk, who speaks with confidence, who hesitates before opening a gate. Paired with the increasingly fluid nature of hybrid conflict, it paints a portrait of a region where old rules no longer hold, and new ones emerge from the interplay of technology, insurgency, governance, and community endurance. Yet, even in this shifting terrain, the people of the Sahel persist. They rebuild fences, replant gardens, watch over children, share stories, light fires against fear. Their resilience is not loud, but it is steady, a quiet defiance against those who believe the night belongs to them alone. And as new tools cast thin beams of light across darkened valleys, the possibility grows that shadow sovereignty may one day lose its grip, replaced by shared responsibility rather than fear. The future of the borderlands will not be determined solely by drones or patrols, but by the courage of communities who refuse to surrender their lights. The question now rises, vast as the horizon itself: will life reclaim these hours, or will fear continue to walk ahead of every traveler? If you believe that the quiet struggles of ordinary people deserve to be seen, if you believe that even the faintest light can challenge the deepest dark, then stay with us. Their story continues, and so does the night.